What's up, guys? Shawnthebro here, and we are back for another fighting game tutorial episode. This time we are going to be working on Super Moves Part 2, or as we can call them, Ultimate Moves Part 2, whatever the heck we're calling them. But I'm going to stick with Super Moves for the actual video here, but they're basically the same thing. I'm going to load up Pedro's old level here. Thanks again for this awesome stage, Shadow Magnus. His link for ArtStation is down in the description. He's also the guy that made my intro, so feel free to give him any support. Alright, guys, so we're going to get into this today. This one's going to be pretty involved, and I also want to go over some of the things that I've changed since the last episode that aren't related to this topic. So we'll only spend a minute or two on this, so don't worry, I'm not going to waste all your time. But you can see the camera is now a lot more zoomed in than it was. I've changed some of the camera parameters, so in my opinion it looks a lot better. There's still more I want to do with it, but I'm trying to get it closer to a fighting game feeling. I've been using a lot of games like Street Fighter and Killer Instinct for reference, so I just wanted to let you know that I did make some changes, and I'm going to show off the changes. I also want to show you I moved the input stack on the left hand side. You can see it's not now blocking the characters, and it's also below the stamina bar, so it doesn't get in the way of anything. You can keep it, and yeah, I think it looks pretty good. So I wanted to show you those. Normally I don't do anything off of that topic, but I wanted to show you because I'm just doing some general improvements, and I didn't want to keep you in the dark. So if you want to go ahead and change them, the camera or the input stack to how I have them now, I'll show you how, if I could remember where it's at. Cameras, default camera. Okay, so I put a little comment in here, but basically this is how you can determine how close the camera is to the characters. So we weren't ever using the X value here for our actor's location. We were kind of just using where the camera was in the scene, which isn't all that helpful. So that's great, but that's hard-coded. So I wanted to make it so it's always the same distance regardless of the stage you're on. Now, you can feel free to override this if you have a specific stage that's different, but I'd recommend doing this because it is good to have a standard in place. So if you'd like to do that, go ahead and just grab either player 1 or player 2 reference, get the actor location, take the X value. You can also do it here. You don't need to do what I'm doing, but I just broke it out so I knew which one was which. And I just subtracted a certain value that I thought looked good. I thought their location, minus 550, and the x-axis is how deep, right? So you see, this is how far the camera is from the players. So a 550 looked good for me. So I made it 550, but change it to be whatever value you want, and then just add that to the make vector. So I just want to show you guys that I did that. I also changed the field of view. It was 0.1 is being multiplied by that. I changed it to 0.12 because I thought that looked quite a bit better. It's a small change, but it makes a big difference. Lastly, in the set camera boundaries, I moved how far the left and right edge were because I believe they were 500 before. Correct me if I'm wrong. I had them at 500. I forget exactly what they were in on the video, but feel free to play around with these because the camera boundaries were too far for me. So I moved both the left max and the right max to minus 300 and positive 300, and then I made the actual locations of the camera edges at plus 500 and minus 500. This way, you won't really get the mutant's foot going off the screen as much as you used to. So he'll start up and the camera's a little bit closer, so you can see his foot is a little bit off the screen, but as I back up, it rapidly decreases until he reaches the very edge. Now his foot does go pretty much all the way off the screen at that point, so there might be some further adjustments, but in the past it was as soon as he got over to the left side, you could see like half of his body and that was it. I wasn't happy with that, so I modified it quite a bit and zoomed the camera in. Anyway, those are just some little things that I added that I thought would be good to share with you guys in case you wanted to modify them yourselves, but you by no means have to. And yeah, so let's get into the actual tutorial now. But I I just want to show you that. So, okay. For today, like I said, we will be doing super moves. So we did part 1, and here's an iCard to part 1 if you want to catch up on what we've done so far on that. Originally, what we had, and I will go ahead and get my damage up here, get my super meter up here, so that I can explain what I'm talking about. Oh yeah, I've also changed my damage material to this light gray. You can see that player 1, the player on the left, is now like a light gray compared to the brown and reddish color that the second player, the player on the right, has. That's because I'm now in my damage state, this character. He originally was turning to like a blue character, which I thought was funny. I thought the materials were good, but it got very annoying when I was actually trying to test with it. So just so you know, the damaged materials are still working. You can tell they're different, but that's why he looks the way he does now. Okay, so, all right, now, you see I have full super meter. What we were doing in the last episode is we were performing an attack. It was doing a little nice camera zoom, and it was performing that basic action right there, where he does an attack, he does a low camera zoom, he does the swift attack, and then if he hits, we were going to do other logic. We never did that other logic in the first episode, so you can probably guess what we're covering today. We're going to be covering what happens when we land that attack. So, to land this attack, we're going to want to do a sequence afterward where the player then starts doing a special attack with more camera work. So I'll show you exactly what it looks like. I'll hit him right about here. So I activate this attack. Bam. And now we're going to do like a punch combo, and we're going to launch the player back and snap the camera back in place. It's not the most exciting combo, and the camera work, of course, isn't the best. But it takes a long time to get those effects that you see in Street Fighter when you see them having their special attacks. So, yeah, you can actually perform an attack with a little bit of camera zoom, camera work. It can kind of, you saw us moving around, panning in, going to different parts that we want. You can also have the camera snap to certain locations and things like that. And he's going to do a set of attacks that do damage to the player as those attacks hit, but we're not going to have any knockback or anything until the end. So we can also go ahead and attach our enemy to our character. That way, if we want to do some sort of grapples or things like that during that sequence, we can do that. We're not going to do that today because we have to get into grapples and things as their own concepts before we start involving them. But I just wanted to point out that it will be easy to insert them into this section we're doing after that's done. So your possibilities will grow a lot as the series continues, so no worries there. I tried to think of everything I could so you guys can make the super moves that you want. Okay, so let's go into our mutant character BP. So our mutant character BP is going to have something that you can see it's called experimental over here. So I'll explain that in a second, why I'm using that and what the alternative is. So what we're trying to achieve here is we go into that static frame where he plays a little bit of or that static camera where he plays that animation where he's like, oh, I'm flexing because I'm nice and strong. And then he does his attack. Now if he lands his attack, if you're familiar with Street Fighter, a lot of times then they'll go into a separate animation entirely. The enemy cannot get out of this animation at all. The player doesn't have to do anything in the animation. It's fully scripted. That's the effect we're going for here. So if you're doing that, if you're trying to mimic that, what we need to do is have a camera that can give us the functionality we want in terms of, you know, its animation. And we also want to include the logic to make it so we automatically perform the animation that we want and deal damage to the player, or excuse me, the enemy as at timestamps that we want, things like that. We don't necessarily want to create hitboxes for all those. It could kind of get ugly, and I don't think in training, when you see that, they're usually using hitboxes. They're usually just dealing damage directly, so we will also be mimicking that behavior. Okay. I know I'm talking a lot and not showing a lot, but we're going to get into it. We're kind of busy. Where did my center camera go? Where did you go? He's saying he's gone, but he's not gone. There, he's back. Okay, thank you. Thank you for returning to us, sir. So, okay. Now, we have something in here called an actor sequence. Now, this is technically experimental. So, experimental means it doesn't have necessarily support on Unreal's side. So if they decide to take it out at any point, they have the ability to do so. It also means that there won't be documentation on it, or at least not complete documentation. But what we're going to do is we're going to use this today. Now, if this gets taken out in your version of Unreal, or for whatever reason you can't use it or don't want to use it, there is an alternative that works pretty much exactly the same way, but the way you have to set it up is slightly different. So I will be covering both. Okay, so let's start with this, because this is the way we're actually doing it, and I'll show you what the alternative. So if you add a component on your character, I say add it on the character because, well, 2 reasons. One, technically, if you're on the left or right of the enemy, you have to do a different animation for each. You could mirror the sequence, and it would be perfectly fine if you'd like. You might want to switch some things around depending on how your game is set up, but it's better to do it on the character because you can see everything that's happening. So go ahead and type in, or go ahead and hit Add Component and type Actor Sequence. This is what you want. If you don't see this for any reason, go to Edit, Plugins, Built in, and then it's right here, Actor Sequence Experimental. Make sure that is enabled. You can also type in Actor Sequence, because sometimes it's not actually up front. I don't know why, but even when I click on Built in, sometimes it's not in alphabetical order. So if that happens to you for whatever reason, feel free to just type it in. Make sure it is enabled. Should note this is in 4.24.1, I think. I have a lot of versions of Unreal for work and for YouTube tutorials, so I apologize if the version is wrong. I can put it in the description to be sure. But that's how you can get your actor sequence. Now, what we're going to do in this is we're going to attach a cine camera, which is like a cinematic camera. So you do the same thing, add camera component, and do cine camera right here. So here's your cine camera, and it will automatically go here. Now, you don't have to change anything with this. To be honest with you, even though I know what a lot of these things mean, I don't know how they would affect the game and the camera's viewpoint without actually seeing it. So I left almost all of it alone. So if you click on focus settings here and click focus method, now by default, I forget exactly what it is. I think it's manual by default. I went ahead and switched it to none. It actually looked really blurry when I first put this on and had it on manual. So I didn't want that, obviously. I wanted it to be on none. I'm sure if you're more familiar with the Cine camera, then you could switch some things around. But to be honest, it doesn't really need it for what we're going for, because we're going to be doing post-processing and things like that later in the series. So we can always cover that separately and without using the Cine camera for it. Anyway, feel free to add this and switch whatever you want around. But the important part here is we're going to use something called Sequencer. Now, some of you may be familiar with this. I've never used it in the tutorials, so I won't have explained it to you. Basically, we can use this actor sequence to make our Cinecamera do animations and things like that. Make it look really nice and fancy. And that's how I got the little swivel effect and the zooming in effect I had while my guy was beating up the other guy. What you do is you click on your actor sequence and you go over to the details panel and look at sequence, and then hit focus tab or open tab. Depending on if you have the tab open or not, it might be called open tab. I already have sequencer open, so for me it's focus tab, but hit this button. It'll bring it up for you. Now, what this does is this allows us to basically make animations quickly. It allows us to make things happen based on keyframes and a timeline. Basically, this is your timeline, okay? So this is in seconds for how long you want this effect to occur. Right now I have mine at about 3.5 seconds worth of time. You can see it's at 30 FPS, and these symbols are key, like they're for key properties and key frames. So you can go ahead and click on any of these pluses, which you won't have up on your screen yet. I'll show you how to get them. And these will make all these red dots you see are where significant changes happened. So you can make changes on this timeline, and Unreal will automatically do the work to animate it for you. You can see the camera is moving to the player in a way that I set up. Now, I did this very quickly, so you can spend a lot more time on it and make it look really nice. Okay, to get started with Sequencer, it should already come up when you hit Open Tab. If for whatever reason it doesn't, and I've had it happen before, just hit Window and hit Sequencer right here, and then it should pop up. Okay, you can hit Add Track, and then Component, and then Cine Camera. So I can't do it because I already have the Cine Camera here. But if you hit this and you have your Cine Camera attached to your character, when you look at your components, it'll be here. Click on that, and that will open up this. You'll see this. And it won't have, it'll just look like this. Then you can hit Add Track here, and it'll let you pick the different things that you want to change. Once you hit Add Track, make sure you hit Transform, and it will make this for you. Now, I think all these are closed by default, so it'll look like this or something. You can open them up. I did. You don't have to. I like to see everything that I can. I'll close Scale because I don't need that. And then these little symbols in the middle, it's like a little plus sign. This adds a new keyframe, or I guess it just says add a new key. I was calling it a keyframe the whole time, so feel free to correct me if I'm using the wrong terminology here. But it adds essentially a value at this time in the timeline that you're at where you want a significant change to occur. So we'll even go ahead and we can add another animation in here, and I'll show you exactly how it works. So here's the process. Here's where I've added keys, all these red dots. Now technically you don't have to use all these. You only really should use the one that you're changing. Since I kind of was changing everything to play around with it, I went ahead and just hit plus up here in the transform. But if that makes sense, like if I only want to change the Y location, I can just hit this and spawn this dot and only have the Y location that changes. That's probably a lot better for performance because I don't, again, I was kind of just playing around and changing everything. Then I went ahead and applied it to everything, but feel free to not do that. So for example, while we're here, this is where our camera's at, right? Maybe I want to back up the camera a bit before we end our animation. So if I go to like the 3-second mark, and this is, there we go, right on 3 seconds. I can go ahead and I see I want to change my X-axis, I can tell is the one I want. So I can go ahead and add the X location here as a key. And then I can change this X value. So I can move it backward a bit, like 450. And it's not much, so maybe we'll make it like 500. Okay. And now you can see Unreal will automatically complete the animation for me. So it goes in, and then comes back out. And then the animation ends. So that's how you can add little keys to change things. It's that simple. As soon as you add a key here and then change this value, you're good to go. You don't actually have to do anything else. When you move the timeline now, you'll actually see that it added it as something that happens in this animation, in this sequence. So there you go. That's how you can make a nice little camera animation. Again, it took me probably about 10 minutes to do this, maybe a little bit less even. If you spent a little bit of time on this, you could make a really nice animation. I'm sure there's people who can make really nice animations in a short amount of time. I'm not claiming to be an expert in that, but that's how you can do that, and that's how you can make it look insanely nice. So that's a nice little cinematic camera sequence. Now, if for whatever reason you can't use actor sequence, or you can't get to it because it's experimental for whatever reason, you can do this with level sequences. And honestly, it's not too much of a big deal. You can go ahead and hit cinematics up the top here and hit add level sequence. And then you do the exact same thing. You'll grab your cine camera and do the same effect with it. The only two issues are, if you do it with the level sequence, you have to add it to every level. You have to make sure the cine camera is in every level and the new level sequence is in every level. And you have to make sure that you can get a reference to the character that you want to use. So you have to have a little bit of logic in your level blueprint to know what character it is so that you know what camera effect should be played. You can also determine that logic when the move is used, like passing in an enum or something like that. So it's not the end of the world. You can use a level sequence and it won't hurt anything at all. but it is a little bit more work. So if this actor sequence is available to you, it's probably the easier option. Okay, good. So now we got that done. We do need to be able to play the sequence that we made though. So if you go into your event graph, I went ahead and added another function. So hit plus on this function, and I called it play super move sequence. So super move sequence, or play super move sequence, the function is right here. What I've done is I've grabbed the first player controller, get player controller, player index 0. It's this thing we always do. Remember, this is one of the things that'll be changing when we go to multiplayer, and I'm aware of that, so don't worry. And then grab self. And we're going to set view target with blend. So grab a reference to self. That's your new view target, and the player controller is your target for the set view target with blend. To be honest, I can never find set view target with blend even when this is on, because I forget you have to drag from the controller. So you might want to just take off context sensitive and find set view target with blend right there. Okay. Now what we're doing here is when this function gets called, we're going to set the view that the player is looking at to the new camera that we made while it's playing the sequence. And then we'll switch it back once the animation is done, of course. So once we set the view target and we're looking at the cinematic camera. Cine camera is weird, so. But anyway, you can go ahead and then do play on the sequence. So it's a little bit weird on how you have to grab it, but you can drag your actor sequence into the scene and type play. Sometimes it'll actually come up for you, I think if you have context sensitive off. But you can just go ahead and type get sequence player and then type play. And it'll know what to do. It'll know what animation to play and all that when you do it like this, because this actor sequence has this track on it. So it'll automatically play this track. Make sure you don't loop, by the way. I don't think there's any other settings I had to set by default, but I made sure that it didn't loop and it didn't autoplay. Okay, so that's all you need to do in the character, and that's basically the stuff that'll be the most confusing probably, because it's the newer stuff. The rest of the stuff we have to do isn't too bad, but we do need, I'm going to close the default camera, we do need to have an animation that supports what we're trying to do here. Now, technically, if you were doing this, you would like if you were making this for a game, professional game, you would have this guy attacking, say this is his super move after he lands his initial hit, right? Now, technically, you'd probably want an animation for the enemy while he's getting hit, so he can play those same animations. I don't have that, so I'm still using his hit reaction, which is fine. It's not a big deal, but you could make it look a little bit nicer if you had a matching animation for taking damage at the same time. Now, for my animation, this is it. I've put it in from Mixamo. So if you need to watch the Mixamo episode because you want to put models or animations in from Mixamo, I'll leave an icon in the top right corner for that right now. It's a pretty long animation, lots of punches. What I've done is I've added a bunch of anim notifies just on 2 tracks here so that I can go through and determine which parts of the animation should cause damage to the enemy. Since this isn't basically just a cinematic, this is basically a cutscene in the middle of a fight, right? Neither player has control over what's happening. The characters are working independently at this point. So I don't want to go and spawn a bunch of hitboxes and clean them up and things like that. We can just trigger damage right on the spot. So basically at all my hits, so I went to where the first hit was, I right-clicked, add notify, new notify, and typed in my name, which I called Mutant Super Combo Hit. Now, that's great. That's perfect. That's what I'm calling for all these hits I want to trigger. There's another one, there's another one, another one, another one, another one, another one. So those are all the hits. Just to note, if you try and put two too close together, you won't be able to, because you'll click on the yellow part there. So make sure to add a new track if you need it, and it can play on both of those. And that's why I have 2 tracks here, just because they were too close together. Now, Mutant Super Combo End is the very last one I have. The reason I have this is so I can know to return back to the original camera, and also I want the damage to be a little bit different here. I want there to be damage and launch values tied to this Notify, the Mutant Super Combo End. So you might want to do something similar. Technically, you could have these as all different ones if you wanted them all to do different amounts of damage and things like that. I just didn't care enough to make a bunch of them to do different damage every time. But feel free. I mean, it's not a big deal. It doesn't take a long time. But the last one should probably be different because this is when we're going to determine if we should change cameras back to regular and all that. Okay. In our Mutant Anim BP, let's start with the state machine because there's not a lot here that changed. In part 1 of the series, or in part 1 of the super move tutorial section, we had the Super Ultimate Start, which was him flexing, right? This is his flex animation. There he does. So we have that. And then he went into his attack that you guys saw earlier, which is where he does this. Okay, cool. So good there. But now we're adding another state on top of that. So don't worry, I didn't change any of the returns or anything, because if he misses this attack, this first attack, we don't go into the cinematic super part of this attack. So don't worry, that stuff stays the same. But we want to add another state here, and I call it the Super Ultimate Combo. So Super Ultimate Start is the animation he plays before he does his initial attack. Super Ultimate is his initial attack where if he hits it, he can go to the combo move, the cinematic move. If he misses, he returns to idle. But if he hits, we go to the Super Ultimate Combo. All I do here is check has landed hit. If you've been following the series from the beginning, and if you haven't and you'd like to, I'll leave a link in the icon in the top right to the very first episode of this series. You'll remember we determined logic in the code, which, don't worry, we don't have to change anything with it today, but I'll go ahead and show you what I'm talking about. When take damage is called, if I could find it, we let the other player know that they've landed the hit. See, this is false. The other player has not landed a hit. But if they're blocking, but if they're not blocking, then we say they have landed a hit. We were doing this for combos back in the day, right? So if you hit your first part of the combo and then you press another button, you can perform another attack. That's how combos work. But we can also use this just as easily here in the super move. This won't really cause any issues because, well, you can only get to this state if you've already done the super attack. So if you're doing the super attack and you've landed a hit, then it's pretty obvious that the hit you landed was the initial super attack. So if you just go ahead and grab your character reference and check for has landed hit, which you should already have if you've been following the series. If not, when the enemy takes damage, you can grab a reference to your other player or the player that is the owner of the hitbox that caused the player damage and set that player to say that they have landed a hit. Then, once you check that, it'll automatically go into the Super Ultimate Combo, which is, by the way, this move that I was showing you earlier, once we've landed the hit. So good. We can trigger that animation, and that's excellent. As usual, it shouldn't loop, and we should be able to call some custom events here. So there's two things I want to do here. When we enter the Super Ultimate Combo state, we want to have in our details panel, all the way at the bottom, notification, start transition event, start super combo. Because that trigger right there is what I'm going to use to make sure that I can switch to the cinematic camera we created earlier. That's the function I'm going to call in the mutant character BP. That way I know we can switch to that camera, show off the cinematic, and then switch back. So just type in whatever you want to call it here. I called it Start Super Combo. If you remember, when you type in anything in these Start Transition events, or End Transition, or Interrupt Transition, you can type them in right here. Start Super, I can't see if I spelled it right, Super Combo. And it's this Anim Notify Start Super Combo right here. Oh, not that one, actually. Anim Notify Start Super Combo. It's actually the event Anim Notify Start Super Combo. The other one's calling the function. So you see it's right here. Now I'm going to do some logic here to, again, call the function that we have in our mutant character BP. The function we made called play super move sequence. So in here, we grab our mutant character reference, cast it to mutant character BP. Now, you're probably asking why I'm doing this. I technically have the mutant character reference as the code class. You can see current type says mutant character, not mutant character BP. This function, the play super move sequence, is only available in the blueprint. So you can mess with that as much as you want. You could have a blueprint implementable event that is available in the code, but the logic is done in the blueprint, and then you could call it directly from this reference if you care that much. I didn't care enough, so I just left it in the blueprint, casted our code class to the BP, mutant character BP, and then called the function. I put a little delay to clear the hitboxes, because if this hitbox is being visualized, or like if we want to visualize them in the in practice mode, then if we don't have this delay and I cleared hitboxes right after, it would, you wouldn't be able to see it at all, which isn't a huge deal, but if frame data is important or hitbox data is important, you might want to keep it. So this is entirely up to you if you want to keep this, and I'll cover clear hitboxes. We've already done it earlier. I just broke it up into a function so that so that we can use it without dragging lines all over the place. You should see it's a lot cleaner now. Without looking at what any of this stuff is, you should know it's so much cleaner than what it was because you don't see lines all over the place. So that's why I did that. So clear hitboxes is this. It's where we go through our proximity hitboxes, and we destroy our actors, and we clear the array. And then we go through active hitboxes, destroy the actors, and clear the array. So I just put this into a function. So no worries there. Quick note on that. If you end up switching it to a function, make sure you don't put the can move equal to true in there. I was doing this after the clear hitbox logic, but if you had this, you see I called clear hitboxes, then call this, that's great. But you don't want to call can move in this specific case when we start the super combo, because actually we want to block the character from moving. When the character is doing this attack, we want to make sure that they stay there and continue to hit the enemy that way. So just a quick little note, if your character can move during a sequence, make sure you're not setting can move back to true. Okay, cool. So we're all good there. By the way, everything up above is similar stuff, but I have changed it a little bit. So the start super transition we made in that last episode stays the same. So don't worry, I didn't modify this at all. And same with end super transition. This stays the same. Basically, this is doing stuff for resetting of the variables, right? So when we do start super transition, this is when we go into the mutant flexing. I call reset variables, but again, reminder, I don't use can move. I don't set can move back to true, because actually in the last episode, he was able to move while using his super. I didn't want that. So I reset these variables, but I did not reset can move. In fact, I forced it to be false. And then when end super transition was done, I also reset the variables, but did not set can move to be true, because we have to see if he's going to land his next attack or not. He should not be able to move during his initial super attack. Hopefully that makes sense, but if not, basically what I'm saying is make sure your player can't move while doing any of this unless you want them to be able to control the character for whatever reason. All right, after that hiatus, let's go ahead and cover the rest of this. So now, once we do the start super combo anim notify and we cast our mutant character BP, we play the move sequence and then we clear the hitboxes. Excellent. So he's playing his animation and we're playing the actor sequence that we created earlier. So that looks pretty nice already. It should look pretty nice. You should have a camera going into your characters. And, well, I'll play it in actually a little bit. But you won't be able to see any damage happening because you don't have any hitboxes. But what we did do was we set up anim notifies in this attack all over the place. So we can flat out just make the enemy take damage when this happens without spawning a hitbox. We have a take damage function for that. So if you look for your anim notify for your mutant super combo hit, which for me is this, it's all these little hits that he does. So all those are going to do this logic. I just grab my mutant character reference, grab the other player, because if I'm the one hitting this anim notify, I'm the one doing the attack. So I don't want to be taking damage. I want the other player to be taking damage. And then I call the take damage function. Now, take damage, I put hit stun time and block stun time to 0.1. These aren't really important. It doesn't really matter because the enemy shouldn't be able to move at this point anyway. Technically, I think he can because I didn't set up anything for not allowing him to move. You can set other player to not be able to move by default during the sequence, but I'm going to be doing another Super/Ultimate episode in this series anyway, and we'll be covering that kind of stuff then. So if you want to get ahead of it, feel free to do that, but don't worry, I didn't forget. So this doesn't really matter, but the reason I put this here is because, remember, if you're using timers in code, you remember how we're doing the hit stun time? Which should be here somewhere. So yeah, begin stun and end stun. If you actually use a timer that's 0 seconds long, then sometimes it can cause issues and just never, it'll start but never complete, instead of just not starting altogether or completing instantly. So I like to keep them at values other than 0. But feel free to do what you want. Just if you're having issues with the stun times after using this move, you might want to switch these to just a random value. That way you can make sure that no issues are coming about. I make it a pretty low damage since it's a lot of hits, so I make it 0.05. Then the mutant super combo and anim notify. That's this one. This is where I want to launch him away and reset the view target back to the original camera. So I do the same thing where I go mutant character reference other player and make him take damage, but I do have a pushback amount and a launch amount to get, you know, like a final last hit where I'm hitting him far away from me. I do a little bit more damage on that attack, and then I also grab our default default camera reference that we were using before for the first part of the super ultimate attacks, and set the view target with blend for player controller 0. So this is setting our camera back from the cinematic camera that we had to the original camera that we have for our fighting game mode, for just our fighting game. Lastly, once that is done, the attack is finished, so I set the super meter back to 0. Technically, you should probably set the super meter back to 0 whenever they use the attack, regardless if they hit or not. But for testing purposes, I put it after they hit. That way, if I do miss or if I want to show you guys that, I don't have to build my super meter up again. Speaking of that, if you want to see episodes on cheats, like cheats for the editor that you guys can use so that you can debug faster and get super meter without changing the actual code really fast, I'm going to be making a video on that for next week. So just feel free to take a look at that. Keep an eye out for it. Good to go. Okay. So I haven't changed anything else around here. I'm kind of just hovering over it for you guys so you can see what's happening. I've switched everything to clear hitboxes instead of using the event that was out there. And I just cleaned up some lines. There were a lot of ugly lines and things, but I just want to show you. I like showing you everything. You can also see the progress that's been happening. Nothing changed here. So there you go. Now we have attacks that can be triggered, and you have to land a hit to perform your combo. You'll play your sequence, and once the sequence is over, you can resume with the regular fighting game camera. We have the new animations in our anim state machine, and we have the ability to make actor sequences. We should go back to our mutant, our state machine here, and look at our transition. So the super ultimate combo back to idle is, as with a lot of my attacks, automatic rule based. So basically once the animation is finished, it will return to idle. I don't have a rule in there. I don't even have any transition events since I wasn't spawning hitboxes while doing this attack. But you could always feel free to have something in there just as a safeguard. No harm done. Alright. And at that point, we're looking pretty good. There is something else I wanted to show you that you should technically do for the super camera. And this kind of does relate to the episode, because the thing we were working with last time where the mutant flexes and it zooms over to him, I technically forgot to show you guys, but if you don't do it this way, the way I'm about to show you, then you will have to make sure that the scene and the camera are in the same spot for all levels, which is really more trouble than it's worth, so you should just do this. So if I get my super meter, and this is what I'm talking about, why cheats would be useful, because then you don't have to grind this out every time. But if I sit here and I punch myself and I get super meter, then when I use this attack, right, he would go into this flex. Now when he's in this flex, I'm technically just moving the camera. However, if I wasn't careful, and I wasn't, unfortunately, in the first episode, it only worked on the scene I was actually testing it in. When I moved it over to this level, I noticed that the camera was really far zoomed out. And that was because I wasn't actually applying anything to the X value again for this camera. It depended on where the camera was placed. So make sure you have the return value location at the spot you want to have it for the super camera, if that makes sense. Like, always have this at a specific spot. I put it at -200 of the player 1 reference. That means wherever the player 1 is in the scene, we want to go -200 of his position, his or her position, and set that as the transform for the super camera. If you didn't do this, you could have some weird zoom issues, or it could be different. So I wanted to point that out, that that's useful. Now this will work on any stage. Okay. There you go, guys. So now, I'll do it one more time so I can show you guys, but now we can have super attacks that actually work in our game. We can take damage, get our butts beat, just like this. Okay. And then we can go over here and we can go to our guy and we can hit him. We can do our super attack. We can land our initial attack, and then we can trigger our cutscene. You can see the damage, the hit reactions, and the snapback at the end of the cutscene are all working as intended. You can feel free to play around with your cinematic camera as much as you want to get a much cooler effect, I'm sure. Again, I did this very quickly, so something very nice about Unreal, you can do very cool work in a very small amount of time. Alright guys, so I think that's it for today's episode. Thank you so much for watching. In the next episode, part 3, and probably the final part for Supers and Ultimates, we'll be covering Player 2, Super and Ultimate, and flipping the cinematic camera and things like that. So if you're on the other side and you use the attack, that way it'll work for either side, and making sure that both players can use it, because right now Player 2 can't even use it the same way. He can use it, but he doesn't go through all the states and stuff. Not a huge deal, but it's just, again, issues with the camera and positioning that would kind of throw off the whole feel of it. So it's not really worth it to skip that, because, you know, whether you're on the left or the right, you should be able to use your super move and it should function as intended. So, but yeah. So anyway, guys, we'll be working on flipping the cinematic camera and the regular super camera for that initial mutant flex that he does, for whether you're on left or right. That way both player 1 and player 2, or if they flip sides, will be able to use their super attack, and it will still look the same way that it should, regardless of the side they're facing. And then afterward, we will be covering Input Stacks Part 5, which I believe will be the last one for now, where Player 2 has his own input stack as well, which will be useful. And if you guys want to see how I made the input stack appear the way I did, if you go to your character HUD, remember I had my input stacks in the middle of the screen, I moved them to be about 15 units off the left and the right side of the screen, so they're in the same spot, matching with the end of the health bars. But then also what I did was I grabbed the inputs and I put their 0 to 1, where the stamina bar, or the super meter, or no, I put their 0 to 0, but the super meter 0 is at 1. And in fact, I actually just forgot and just realized I never put P2 to 1. So there you go. Now the input stack will appear behind the stamina bar. If you want the opposite effect, just reverse the numbers. Make these 0 and put the input stacks to 1. Alright guys, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe. It helps me more than anything else you can do for the channel, and just lets me know that I'm doing a good job and helping teach you things that you want to learn. If you had any issues with this video or any of my tutorials, feel free to join the Discord. I can't put it in an iCard, but it is in the description. You can just click the link, and I'll be happy to help you with any of the issues you had. And lastly, guys, if you want to come support me on Twitch, twitch.tv/Shawnthebro27, feel free to come support me. Watch me play some Souls Wednesday, where we play Dark Souls games on Wednesday. It's my first time playing through, so struggling a bit, but making pretty darn good progress. We're in Dark Souls 2 right now. And on Friday we play Resident Evil games. Right now we're about to finish Resident Evil 4 on Professional. So anyway guys, I'm Shawnthebro, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye my friends.